The scream of metal tearing against ice-slicked steel pierced the February night like a knife through silk, and Rebecca Zimmerman felt the world tilt sideways as the passenger car lurched violently off the tracks. She grabbed for the seat in front of her, but the force of the derailment sent her tumbling into the aisle along with a dozen other passengers, their cries mixing with the horrible grinding roar of iron and wood splintering against frozen earth. The lamp oil ignited somewhere in the chaos, casting dancing shadows of orange flame against the windows now pointing toward the star-filled Colorado sky. And then everything went dark and silent except for the groaning of wounded metal and the soft whimpers of those still conscious enough to make sound. Rebecca's head throbbed where it had struck something hard, and she tasted copper on her tongue. She tried to move but found her legs pinned beneath a fallen beam that had torn loose from the ceiling. The cold air rushed in through a gaping hole in the side of the car, and she could see snowflakes drifting through the firelight like tiny ghosts. Her breath came in short gasps, partly from pain and partly from the fear that gripped her chest like an iron band. She had been traveling from Denver to visit her aunt in Salida, Colorado, a journey that should have taken only hours on the Denver and Rio Grande Railway. Now, she lay trapped in wreckage somewhere in the mountain passes, and the temperature was dropping fast. "Help," she called out, but her voice came weak and thin. She tried again, louder this time. "Please, someone help me." A man nearby moaned in response, but she could not see him in the darkness. The fire from the lamp oil was already dying down, and she realized with growing terror that if she did not get free soon, the cold would take her long before any rescue could arrive. She pulled at her legs, ignoring the sharp pain that shot through her left ankle, but the beam would not budge. Her fingers grew numb as she clawed at the splintered wood, and tears of frustration and fear froze on her cheeks. Then she heard it, the sound of horses approaching at a gallop, followed by men's voices calling out in the night. She tried to shout again, but could only manage a hoarse croak. Footsteps crunched through snow somewhere outside the wreckage, and then a figure appeared at the torn opening in the car, silhouetted against the starlight. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat covered in snow. He carried a lantern in one hand and a rope coiled over his shoulder. "Anyone alive in here?" His voice was deep and steady, the kind of voice that commanded attention without needing to shout. "Yes," Rebecca managed, finding her voice at last. "I'm trapped. My legs are pinned." The man moved quickly through the wreckage, stepping carefully over debris and fallen passengers. When he reached her side, he set the lantern down and knelt beside her, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. He was younger than his authoritative voice suggested, perhaps 28 or 30, with strong features weathered by sun and wind. His eyes were gray like storm clouds, and they studied her situation with an intensity that was somehow comforting. "Name's Ryder Quinn," he said, already examining the beam that trapped her. "My ranch is about 2 miles west of here. We heard the crash and saw the fire." "Rebecca Zimmerman," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Can you get me out?" "I will," he said simply, and something in the certainty of those 2 words made her believe him. He turned and called back through the opening. "Jake, get in here with the crowbar. We have survivors pinned." Another man appeared moments later, younger and leaner than Ryder, carrying tools and more rope. Together they worked to leverage the beam off Rebecca's legs, and when it finally lifted, the relief was so sudden that she gasped. Ryder caught her as she tried to sit up, his hands strong and gentle at the same time. "Easy now," he said. "Can you feel your feet?" Rebecca wiggled her toes experimentally and nearly cried with relief. Yes, I think so. My ankle hurts, but I can feel everything." "Good, that's real good." He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, and she had not even realized she was shaking from the cold until the warmth hit her. "We need to get everyone out of here before the cold gets worse. Can you walk if I help you?" "I think so." He lifted her carefully, one arm supporting her back and the other beneath her knees, carrying her as though she weighed nothing at all. She wanted to protest that she could manage on her own, but the truth was that her legs felt like water and her head was still spinning. So she let herself lean against his chest and felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through the thick coat. He carried her through the snow to where several other survivors were gathering near a wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. The younger man, Jake, was helping an elderly couple while two more ranch hands worked to pull people from the wreckage. Ryder set Rebecca down gently in the back of the wagon, which was already lined with blankets and hay for warmth. "How many were on the train?" he asked. "I don't know," Rebecca said, trying to think through the fog in her mind. "Maybe 30 passengers in our car alone. There were 2 more cars behind us." Ryder's jaw tightened. "Jake, get word to the other boys to check the rear cars. And send someone to ride for town, get the doctor and anyone else who can help." He looked back at Rebecca. "You just rest now. We will do what we can." The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca watched from the wagon as Ryder and his men worked tirelessly to extract survivors from the wreckage. They pulled out 12 more people from her car alone and 6 from the rear passenger car. Not everyone was so fortunate. She saw them carry out 3 bodies wrapped in blankets, and she turned her face away, unable to watch. The engineer and fireman had both survived but were badly injured. The brakeman was among the dead. When they finally loaded the last survivor into wagons, Ryder climbed up onto the seat beside the driver of Rebecca's wagon. His face was drawn with exhaustion, and his hands were bleeding from a dozen small cuts, but his eyes remained alert and focused. "All right," he said. "Let's get these folks home." The ride to the Quinn ranch took nearly an hour through snow that was falling steadily heavier. Rebecca drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of the wagon's movement and the low voices of the injured around her. When they finally arrived, she roused enough to see a sprawling ranch house with warm light glowing in the windows and smoke rising from 2 chimneys. Several outbuildings stood nearby, and she could make out the dark shapes of barns and corrals in the snowy darkness. The front door flew open and a woman appeared on the porch, gray-haired and sturdy with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Lord have mercy," she called out. "Ryder, what happened?" "Train derailed about 2 miles east near the pass," Ryder said, jumping down from the wagon. "We brought all the survivors we could find. Going to need every bed and every blanket we have, and someone needs to ride for Doc Henderson in Salida if he has not been sent for already." The woman, who Rebecca later learned was Martha, the ranch cook and housekeeper, immediately began organizing. Within minutes, the ranch house had transformed into a makeshift hospital. The most seriously injured were brought inside to the bedrooms, while those with lighter injuries were settled in the parlor and dining room. Rebecca found herself in a small upstairs bedroom with a fire crackling in the hearth and a soft quilt pulled up to her chin. Martha had helped her out of her torn and blood-stained traveling dress and into a clean nightgown that smelled of lavender and soap. "You just rest now, dear," Martha said, tucking the quilt more firmly around her. "Doctor should be here before dawn, but that ankle needs to stay elevated until he can look at it proper." Rebecca wanted to protest that others needed attention more than she did, but exhaustion claimed her before she could form the words. She slept fitfully, dreaming of screeching metal and orange flames, waking several times to find the fire still burning and the sound of footsteps and low voices in the hallway outside. Once she woke to find Ryder standing in the doorway, checking on her, his tall frame backlit by lamplight from the hall. Their eyes met for a moment, and he nodded once before moving on to check the next room. Morning came gray and cold, with snow still falling steadily outside the window. Rebecca woke to find her ankle swollen to twice its normal size and throbbing with each heartbeat. She tried to sit up, but the movement sent a wave of dizziness through her head, and she fell back against the pillows with a small gasp. A moment later, Martha appeared with a tray bearing a bowl of oatmeal and a cup of hot coffee. "Easy now," Martha said, setting the tray on the bedside table. "You took a nasty knock to the head, and that ankle is not going anywhere for a while. Dr. Henderson came about an hour ago. He's been making rounds with all the patients. Says you were lucky considering. Nothing broken, just a bad sprain and a concussion. You will be on bed rest for at least a week, probably longer." "A week?" Rebecca sat up carefully this time, accepting the coffee gratefully. "I can't impose on your hospitality for that long. I should arrange transport to my aunt's house in Salida." "Not in this weather, you will not," Martha said firmly. "The pass is snowed in, and even if it were not, you are in no condition to travel. Besides, we have got 15 other folks from that train staying here until they are well enough to move or until their families can come for them. One more is not going to make a difference." Rebecca sipped the coffee, feeling its warmth spread through her chest. "Where is Mr. Quinn?" "I should thank him for saving my life." "Out checking on the livestock and making sure the barns are secure against the storm," Martha said. "That man has not slept a wink since yesterday afternoon, but try telling him to rest. Stubborn as a mule, just like his father was." Over the next few days, Rebecca remained confined to the small upstairs bedroom, though she insisted on sitting up in a chair by the window once the dizziness passed. From her vantage point, she could see the ranch yard below, and she found herself watching for Ryder each time he crossed between the house and the outbuildings. He seemed to be everywhere at once, tending to injured passengers, managing his ranch hands, coordinating with the railroad officials who arrived on the third day to assess the wreckage and arrange transport for survivors. He moved with a quiet competence that Rebecca found herself admiring more and more. On the fourth day, he finally came to her room to check on her himself. He knocked softly on the doorframe, his hat in his hands, looking almost shy despite his size and obvious authority. "Mr. Quinn," Rebecca said, trying to stand, but he waved her back into the chair. "Please stay seated," he said, stepping into the room but keeping a respectful distance. "I just wanted to see how you are healing. Martha says the swelling in your ankle is going down." "Much better, thanks to your help," Rebecca said. "I have been wanting to thank you properly for what you did. You saved my life and the lives of so many others. If you had not come when you did in that cold, I do not think many of us would have survived the night." Ryder looked uncomfortable with the praise, turning his hat in his hands. "Any decent man would have done the same. We heard the crash, we went to help. That is just what neighbors do out here. Still, I am grateful. And I am sorry to be such a burden on your household during what must already be a difficult time with so many guests." "You are no burden," he said, and something in the way he looked at her made her breath catch. His gray eyes held hers for a long moment before he looked away, clearing his throat. "I actually came to tell you that the railroad has arranged for a special train to take the survivors into Salida tomorrow, weather permitting. Doc Henderson thinks most folks are stable enough to travel now. Your aunt has been sent word, and she is arranging accommodations at the hotel for you until you are fully recovered." Rebecca felt an unexpected disappointment at this news. Tomorrow? So soon? The railroad is anxious to get their passengers to their destinations, and to start the investigation into what caused the derailment," Ryder said. "Though if Doc Henderson does not clear you for travel, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need." "I'm sure I will be fine to travel," Rebecca heard herself say, even though part of her wanted to protest that she needed more time. "You have already been far too generous." Ryder nodded, but she thought she saw a flicker of something like disappointment cross his face as well. "Well, if you need anything before then, just let Martha know." He started to leave, then paused in the doorway. "Miss Zimmerman, I am glad you are all right. When I first saw you trapped under that beam, I was not sure we would get you out in time." "You did, though," she said softly. "You did not give up." "No," he agreed, meeting her eyes again. "I did not." That night, Rebecca lay awake listening to the wind howl around the eaves of the ranch house, and she realized she did not want to leave. The feeling was so sudden and so strong that it startled her. She barely knew Ryder Quinn, had spoken with him only a handful of times, and yet there was something about him that drew her like a lodestone. It was not just gratitude for the rescue, though she certainly felt that. It was the way he moved through the world with quiet confidence, the way he cared for his people and his animals with equal dedication, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her. She found herself wondering about him, about his life here on this remote ranch, about why a man like him was not already married. The next morning, the weather cleared enough for travel, and the special train arrived from Salida to collect the survivors. Rebecca dressed in borrowed clothes, since her own had been ruined in the wreck, and made her way carefully down the stairs with Martha's help. Her ankle was still weak, but she could put weight on it with only moderate pain. The other passengers were already gathering in the front room, and railroad officials were checking names and arranging transportation to the depot. Ryder was there, directing the process, making sure everyone was warm enough and had their belongings. When he saw Rebecca, he excused himself from the railroad man he was speaking with and came to her side. "Let me help you to the wagon," he said, offering his arm. She took it gratefully, feeling the solid strength of him through the fabric of his coat. Outside, the world was blinding white with fresh snow, and the air was so cold it burned her lungs. Ryder helped her up into the wagon bed, which was lined with straw and blankets, and she found herself wanting to say something, anything, to extend this moment. "Mr. Quinn," she began, then hesitated. "Ryder," he said. "Please, just Ryder." "Ryder," she repeated, liking the feel of his name on her tongue. "I wish I had words enough to express my gratitude. You have been so kind, you and Martha and everyone here. I will not forget it." He looked up at her, one hand resting on the side of the wagon, and for a moment she thought he might say something important. But then the railroad official called out that they were ready to depart, and the moment passed. Ryder stepped back, settling his hat on his head. "Safe travels, Miss Zimmerman," he said formally. "I hope your aunt is well, and that you make a full recovery." "Thank you," she whispered, and then the wagon was moving, carrying her away from the Quinn ranch and back toward the world she had been traveling to before the crash. She turned in her seat to watch Ryder standing in the ranch yard, a tall figure growing smaller in the distance, and she felt something twist painfully in her chest. The journey to Salida took less than 2 hours on the new train, and Rebecca was delivered safely to her Aunt Catherine's care at the Grand Hotel. Catherine was her mother's older sister, a widow who had moved to Colorado for her health 5 years earlier, and now ran a successful boarding house in town. She fussed over Rebecca's injuries and insisted she stay in bed for at least another week, bringing her meals on trays and entertaining her with gossip about the town's inhabitants. But Rebecca found it hard to focus on her aunt's chatter. Her thoughts kept returning to the Quinn ranch, to the warmth of the fire in that small upstairs bedroom, to the way Ryder's eyes had lingered on her face. She told herself she was being foolish. The man had rescued her, nothing more. Any decent person would have done the same, as he himself had said. There was no reason to think he had felt anything beyond common compassion for an injured stranger, and yet she could not stop thinking about him. 2 weeks passed. Rebecca's ankle healed enough for her to walk without pain, and the headaches from her concussion finally faded. She began helping her aunt around the boarding house, cooking and cleaning and making up the guest rooms. It was pleasant work, and Salida was a charming town nestled in the Arkansas River Valley, surrounded by towering peaks still white with snow. But Rebecca felt restless in a way she could not name. Then, on a bright Saturday morning, she answered a knock at the boarding house door and found Ryder Quinn standing on the porch, his hat in his hands and a nervous expression on his weather-beaten face. "Mr. Quinn," she said, unable to keep the surprise and pleasure from her voice. "What are you doing here?" "I had to come to town for supplies," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "And I wanted to see how you were healing. If that is all right, I mean. I do not want to intrude." "You are not intruding at all," Rebecca said quickly, stepping back to let him in. "Please come in. My aunt would love to meet you. She has heard all about how you saved us from the train wreck." Catherine appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, and Rebecca made the introductions. Her aunt took one look at Ryder's embarrassed face and Rebecca's flushed cheeks, and her eyes lit up with understanding. She insisted Ryder stay for lunch, and before he could politely decline, she had ushered them both into the dining room and was bringing out plates of roast chicken and fresh bread. Over the meal, Rebecca found herself telling Ryder about her life in Denver, where she had been working as a teacher at a girls' school. He told her about the ranch, which his father had established 20 years earlier, and which Ryder had been running since his father's death 3 years ago. He spoke of the challenges of ranching in Colorado's high country, of brutal winters and drought summers, of cattle rustlers and mountain lions. But he also spoke of the beauty of watching sunrise paint the peaks pink and gold, of the satisfaction of seeing his herd grow, of the good men who worked for him and had become like family. Rebecca found herself drawn into his stories, asking questions, laughing at his dry humor, watching the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. And when Catherine excused herself to tend to something in the kitchen, leaving them alone at the table, the conversation turned more personal. "Can I ask you something?" Ryder said, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "Why were you traveling to Salida in February? Seems like a dangerous time to be crossing the mountains." Rebecca smiled sadly. "My mother passed away last autumn. I have been feeling rather lost since then. My father died when I was young, and it was always just the two of us. My aunt invited me to come stay with her for a while, to get away from Denver and the memories there. I thought a change of scenery might help." "I am sorry for your loss," Ryder said quietly. "I understand something of what you are feeling. When my father died, I thought I would drown in the emptiness of this house without him. He was the one who taught me everything about running a ranch, about being a man. For a long time, I did not think I could fill his boots." "But you did," Rebecca said. "You are obviously very good at what you do. The way your men respect you, the way you handled everything with the train wreck. Your father would be proud." Ryder looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Rebecca," he said, using her first name for the first time, "I need to be honest with you. I did not just come to town for supplies. I have been thinking about you every day since you left the ranch. I tried to tell myself I was just worried about your recovery, but that is not the whole truth. The truth is, I have not been able to get you out of my mind." Rebecca's breath caught. "I have been thinking of you too," she admitted. I told myself I was being silly, that we barely know each other. But there is something about you, Ryder, something that feels right in a way I cannot explain." He reached across the table and took her hand in his calloused fingers gentle as they curled around hers. "I know we have not known each other long, and I know I am just a rancher without much polish or refinement, but I would like the chance to know you better, if you would allow it. I would like to come calling on you proper, if that would be acceptable." "Yes," Rebecca said without hesitation. "Yes, I would like that very much." And so began a courtship that was unconventional in its speed but felt entirely natural to both of them. Ryder made the journey into Salida twice a week, despite the demands of the ranch and the lingering winter weather. He took Rebecca on walks along the Arkansas River when the temperature allowed, and they attended church together on Sundays. He showed her how to ride properly, lending her a gentle mare from his string, and they explored the valley together on horseback. As the days grew gradually longer and warmer, Catherine watched their romance bloom with approval, though she warned Rebecca not to rush into anything. But Rebecca knew in her heart that what she felt for Ryder was real and lasting. He was unlike any man she had known in Denver, where the men she had met were more interested in social status and appearances than substance. Ryder was solid and real, a man who worked with his hands and kept his word and looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Spring came late to the high country, but when it finally arrived in late April, it transformed the valley into a riot of wildflowers and new green grass. The snow receded from all but the highest peaks, and the ranch work intensified as calving season began. Ryder's visits to town became less frequent, and Rebecca found herself missing him terribly. So when he asked if she would like to come spend a few days at the ranch to see the spring work, she accepted immediately, with Catherine's blessing. Martha greeted her like a long-lost daughter when Ryder brought her to the ranch on a warm May morning. The housekeeper had prepared the same upstairs bedroom Rebecca had stayed in after the train wreck, and Rebecca felt an unexpected surge of emotion as she looked around the familiar space. So much had changed since that terrible night in February, and yet some things felt like they had come full circle. Over the next few days, Rebecca threw herself into life at the ranch. She helped Martha in the kitchen, learning to cook for the crew of hungry ranch hands. She watched from the corral fence as Ryder and his men worked with the cattle, branding the new calves and checking the herd for any injuries or illness. She saw a side of Ryder she had only glimpsed before, his easy command of his men, his patience with the animals, his deep knowledge of the land and everything that lived on it. On her third evening at the ranch, Ryder took her riding up into the foothills to watch the sunset. They dismounted at a spot overlooking the ranch buildings far below, and Rebecca stood at the edge of the overlook, marveling at the vast sweep of valley and mountain stretching away in every direction. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the deepening blue above. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "Yes," Ryder agreed, but when she looked at him, he was not watching the sunset. He was watching her. "Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I am not much good with fancy words, so I am just going to say it plain. These past 3 months have been the best of my life. Every minute I spend with you makes me happier than I knew a man could be. I know it has not been long, but out here, time moves different. When you know something is right, you do not need to wait years to be sure of it." He dropped to one knee there on the hillside, pulling a simple gold ring from his pocket. "Rebecca Zimmerman, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Would you stay here with me and make this ranch a home? I promise I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy and keep you safe." Tears spilled down Rebecca's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she finally found her voice, it came out as barely a whisper. "Yes, yes, Ryder, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that took her breath away. She melted against him, feeling like she had finally found the place where she belonged, the person she was meant to be with. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ryder slipped the ring onto her finger and held her hand up to catch the last rays of sunset. "My mother's ring," he said softly. "My father gave it to her when they got married, and she made me promise before she passed that I would give it to the woman I loved when I found her. I think she would have liked you very much." "I wish I could have met her," Rebecca said, examining the ring through her tears. It was simple but beautiful, a gold band with a small diamond set in the center. "I will treasure this always." They rode back to the ranch as darkness fell, and when Ryder announced their engagement to Martha and the ranch hands at supper, there were cheers and congratulations all around. Jake, the young ranch hand who had helped rescue Rebecca from the train wreck, pumped Ryder's hand enthusiastically and told Rebecca she was getting the best man in Colorado. Martha cried and hugged them both, declaring that she had known from the moment she saw them together that this would happen. Rebecca sent a telegram to her aunt the next morning, and Catherine replied immediately with her blessing and congratulations. She offered to help plan the wedding and suggested they hold it at the church in Salida in June, when the weather would be reliably good and Rebecca would have time to make or purchase a proper dress. But when Catherine arrived at the ranch a week later to discuss the details, she found Rebecca radiant with happiness and more excited about starting her life with Ryder than about the wedding itself. "I do not need a fancy ceremony," Rebecca told her aunt as they sat on the porch shelling peas for supper. "I just want to marry him and begin our life together." Catherine smiled knowingly. "That is how I felt when I married your uncle. But you will never regret taking the time to do it properly, with all your friends and family there to witness it. Trust me on this, dear. You will treasure those memories for the rest of your life." So they planned a simple but lovely ceremony for the first Saturday in June. Rebecca made her own dress with Catherine's help, a cream-colored silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Martha baked the cake, and the ranch hands spent their free time whitewashing the little church in Salida and decorating it with wildflowers. The guest list was small, mostly folks from town and the ranch, but Rebecca found she did not mind. These were the people who would be part of her new life, and she was coming to care for them all. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, and Rebecca woke in her aunt's guest room with butterflies dancing in her stomach. Catherine helped her dress and arranged her dark hair in an elegant twist, and when Rebecca finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy, she realized. Truly, deeply happy in a way she had not been since before her mother's death. The ceremony was short and sweet, with the circuit preacher officiating and Jake serving as Ryder's best man. When Ryder saw Rebecca walking down the aisle on her aunt's arm, his eyes went bright with emotion, and she saw him swallow hard. She floated toward him as if in a dream, and when he took her hands in his and spoke his vows in that deep, steady voice, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I promise to love you and cherish you all the days of my life," Ryder said, his gray eyes never leaving hers. "To stand by you in good times and bad, in sickness and health, until death parts us. You are my heart, Rebecca. You are my home." She spoke her own vows through tears, her voice shaking with emotion. "I promise to love you faithfully, to support you and encourage you, to make a home with you wherever we may be. You saved my life that night, Ryder, but you did more than that. You showed me that life can be beautiful again, even after loss. I choose you, today and always." When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ryder kissed her with such tenderness that the small congregation broke into spontaneous applause. Rebecca laughed against his lips, and he caught her up in his arms and spun her around right there in the church aisle, both of them grinning like fools. The reception was held at the hotel, with dancing and food and toasts that went on late into the evening. But finally, as the sun was setting, Ryder and Rebecca slipped away from the festivities and rode out to the ranch together. He had built a fire in the hearth of the master bedroom, the room that had been his parents' and was now theirs, and had filled it with wildflowers. When he carried her over the threshold, Rebecca felt like her heart might burst with joy. That night, they made love for the first time, slowly and sweetly, learning the shape and feel of each other with wondering hands and whispered words. Ryder was gentle and patient, and when Rebecca finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt more content than she had ever imagined possible. This was home, she thought drowsily. Not a place, but a person. Wherever Ryder was, that was where she belonged. Their first year of marriage passed in a blur of work and laughter and deepening love. Rebecca threw herself into her new role as ranch wife, learning from Martha how to manage the household, how to cook hearty meals for hungry ranch hands, how to preserve food for winter and tend a vegetable garden in the short growing season. She learned to ride confidently and began accompanying Ryder on his rounds of the ranch, loving the time they spent together moving cattle or checking fences, or simply exploring the vast property that was now her home. The ranch hands, who had initially been uncertain about having a woman among them, came to respect and care for Rebecca, as she proved herself capable and willing to work hard. She helped deliver a difficult calf one freezing spring night, staying up until dawn with Ryder and Jake to save both the mother and baby. She learned to shoot well enough to protect the chicken coop from foxes and coyotes. And she began teaching reading and writing to some of the younger ranch hands in the evenings, setting up an informal school in the parlor twice a week. By the following February, exactly 1 year after the train wreck that had brought them together, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. She told Ryder one evening as they sat by the fire in their bedroom, and his face lit up with such joy that she started crying all over again. He pulled her into his lap and held her close, his hand splayed protectively over her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered in wonder. "Our baby. Rebecca, you have made me the happiest man alive." "I am scared," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I am not a good mother?" "You will be an amazing mother," Ryder said firmly, "and nothing is going to go wrong. We will take good care of you, and Doc Henderson is the best in the state. Everything will be fine." And it was. Rebecca sailed through the pregnancy with only minor discomfort, continuing to work around the ranch until Martha finally put her foot down in her 8th month and insisted she rest. Ryder fussed over her constantly, bringing her meals in bed and reading to her in the evenings and refusing to let her lift anything heavier than a teacup. Rebecca found his protectiveness endearing, even when it was excessive. Their son was born on a warm September evening, just as the aspens were beginning to turn gold on the mountainsides. The labor was long and hard, but when Doc Henderson finally placed the squalling infant in Rebecca's arms, she forgot all the pain in an instant. Ryder stood beside the bed, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he looked at his wife and newborn son. "He is perfect," Ryder breathed. "Look at him, Rebecca. He is just perfect." "What should we name him?" Rebecca asked, stroking the baby's soft cheek. "I was thinking maybe Robert," Ryder said quietly, "after my father, Robert James Quinn, if that is all right with you." "Robert James Quinn," Rebecca repeated, smiling down at the tiny face. "It is perfect. He is perfect. We are perfect." The years that followed were the happiest of Rebecca's life. Little Robert grew strong and healthy, learning to walk and then to run across the ranch yard, trailing after his father everywhere he went. When Robert was 2, Rebecca gave birth to twin daughters, Emma and Sarah, and the house rang with the sounds of children's laughter. Ryder expanded the ranch, buying adjacent land and increasing the herd, and Rebecca continued teaching the ranch hands children in a small schoolhouse Ryder built near the main house. They faced hardships, of course. There was a terrible drought the summer the twins were 4, and they lost nearly a quarter of the herd. There was the winter when Robert caught pneumonia, and they spent terrifying weeks nursing him back to health. There was the day a mountain lion killed 2 calves in the high pasture, and Ryder and Jake spent 3 days tracking it before finally bringing it down. But through all of it, Rebecca and Ryder faced the challenges together, their love growing deeper and stronger with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Rebecca with a trip to Denver, their first time leaving the ranch together since their honeymoon. They left the children with Martha and Catherine, who had moved to the ranch 2 years earlier to help with the growing family, and spent a week in the city where Rebecca had once lived. But Rebecca found she no longer missed the bustle and noise of Denver. Her heart belonged to the mountains now, to the ranch, to the life she and Ryder had built together. "You ever regret it?" Ryder asked her one evening as they strolled through the hotel gardens in Denver, giving up teaching at that fancy school, living out on a remote ranch instead of in the city. Rebecca stopped walking and turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Ryder Quinn, you listen to me. That train wreck was the best thing that ever happened to me. I know that sounds terrible, given that people died, but it brought me to you. It gave me this life, this family, this love. I would not change a single thing, not one moment of it. You and our children are my whole world." He pulled her close and kissed her deeply, not caring that they were in public and people might see. When they finally pulled apart, he was smiling that crooked smile she loved so much. "Good," he said simply, "because you are my whole world too, Rebecca Quinn. And I fall more in love with you every single day." They returned to the ranch renewed and happy, eager to be with their children again. Robert, now 10 years old, was already showing signs of becoming a fine rancher like his father, serious and responsible beyond his years. The twins were wild and joyful, racing around the ranch on their ponies, and getting into mischief that reminded Rebecca of herself as a child. Watching Ryder with the children, seeing his patience and love and the way he encouraged their curiosity about the world, made Rebecca fall in love with him all over again. When Rebecca turned 40, she found herself pregnant one more time, much to everyone's surprise. The pregnancy was harder than her previous ones, and Doc Henderson insisted she rest as much as possible. But in the spring, she gave birth to another healthy son, whom they named Daniel. Robert and the twins were delighted with their baby brother, and the house once again filled with the sounds of a newborn. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Robert grew into a fine young man and eventually married a schoolteacher from Salida, bringing her to live at the ranch and take over the schoolhouse from Rebecca. The twins married in a double ceremony, one to a neighboring rancher and the other to the town doctor's son, and both settled within a few miles of the ranch. Daniel grew up surrounded by love and laughter, the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by his older siblings. Through it all, Rebecca and Ryder's love remained the foundation of everything. They still took rides together into the foothills to watch the sunset, just as they had on the night he proposed. They still sat by the fire in their bedroom on winter evenings, talking about everything and nothing, They still looked at each other across crowded rooms and shared secret smiles that spoke of decades of shared memories and unwavering devotion. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Robert and his wife brought their 3 children. The twins arrived with their families, and Daniel, now a young man of 19 working as his father's right hand on the ranch, helped organize the festivities. Catherine, now in her 80s but still sharp as a tack, gave a toast that had everyone laughing and crying at once. 30 years ago, she said, raising her glass, my niece arrived in Salida on a train that had derailed in the snow. She was injured and lost and grieving her mother. I thought it would take her years to find happiness again. But then this stubborn cowboy refused to give up on rescuing her from that wreck, and he refused to give up on loving her either. And look at what they have built together. A family, a legacy, a love that has weathered every storm. To Rebecca and Ryder, may you have 30 more years together, and may your love continue to inspire all of us. Everyone raised their glasses and drank, and then Robert stood to speak. Dad, Mom, I want you to know how grateful I am for the example you have set. You have shown me what real love looks like, what commitment means, what it takes to build something lasting. You have given us a home filled with warmth and laughter and security. You have taught us to work hard and to value the land and to treat people with respect. Everything good in my life, I owe to you. Rebecca was crying openly now, and she saw that Ryder's eyes were bright with tears as well. He stood and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her as their children and grandchildren applauded. I have only one thing to say, Ryder said, his voice thick with emotion. Rebecca Quinn, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You saved me just as much as I saved you that night. You took a lonely ranch house and made it a home. You took a grieving man and taught him how to be happy again. And you gave me a family beyond my wildest dreams. I love you more today than I did 30 years ago, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you, for as long as I draw breath. He kissed her then, long and sweet, while their family cheered and whistled. And Rebecca thought back to that terrible night 30 years ago, to the cold and the fear and the pain. She thought about how close she had come to death, and how Ryder's strong hands had pulled her from the wreckage. She thought about the journey that had brought her from Denver to this moment, standing in the ranch house, surrounded by the people they had created, and the love they had nurtured. That train derailment had seemed like the worst moment of her life, but it had actually been the beginning of the best part. It had brought her here, to this man, to this life, to this profound and abiding happiness. She had been lost, and Ryder had found her. She had been broken, and he had helped her heal. And together, they had built something beautiful and lasting. As the party continued around them, Rebecca and Ryder slipped away to the porch to watch the sun set over the mountains they loved. Ryder wrapped his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth, still the safest place she knew after all these years. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. Quinn," he murmured against her hair. "Happy anniversary, Mr. Quinn," she replied, turning her face up for his kiss. The sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, and the mountains stood eternal in the distance, and Rebecca knew with absolute certainty that this was where she was meant to be. In Ryder's arms on this land, surrounded by the family and life they had built together. The train wreck had derailed her old life, but it had put her on the track to her true destiny. And she would be grateful for that, and for the cowboy who had saved her, for the rest of her days. They stood there together as the stars began to appear. Two people who had found each other in the midst of disaster and had chosen love every day since. The ranch spread out below them, peaceful in the gathering dusk, and from inside the house came the sounds of their children and grandchildren laughing together. It was a good life, Rebecca thought, better than good. It was everything she had never dared to dream of, handed to her in the form of a gray-eyed cowboy who had refused to let her die in the snow. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Ryder replied. "Always have, always will." And that, Rebecca knew, was the truest promise of all. Not the dramatic rescues or grand gestures, but the quiet daily choice to love and be loved, to stand together through whatever life brought. That was the real story, the one that mattered most. They had found each other in the darkness and the cold, and they had spent 30 years building a light that would shine long after they were gone, passed down through their children and grandchildren to generations yet unborn. As they walked back into the house together, hand in hand, Rebecca looked around at the home they had made and felt complete. This was happiness. This was love. This was forever. And it had all begun with a train derailment in winter, a cowboy who helped survivors, and a journey to a ranch that became home.